Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Hebrews. We're still looking at the final paragraph of Hebrews chapter 3. Today we'll read again verses 18 and 19 of chapter 3. And to whom did God swear that they would never enter his rest, if not to those who disobeyed? So we see they were not able to enter because of their unbelief. Now, the author of Hebrews is talking about those children of Israel who experienced the deliverance of the Exodus. But in the wilderness, they rebelled and they disobeyed. They refused to believe God could bring them into the promised land. So they were not able to enter the rest. The original generation never entered the rest, that is, the promised land of Canaan. Now that story is told in Numbers chapter 13 and 14. We looked at Numbers 13 yesterday. And we saw that when the 12 spies were sent to go over the land, they brought back a report. It's a good land, but 10 of them said, well, we can't take it. 10 of the spies said, the people are too strong. They are giants. We are like grasshoppers. We'll never take the land. And the people rebelled. Of the 12 who went in to spy out the land, only Caleb and Joshua said we can go in with God's help and take the land. Now let's look at verse 14. After the people received the report of the 10 spies, it says in verse 2, if only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives, our children would be better or will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it have been better for us just to go back to Egypt? And they said to each other, we should choose a new leader and go back to Egypt. Do you see the disbelief and the disobedience of the people? They had just experienced the great Exodus as God broke the back of the Egyptian empire and brought them out of free people. And yet here they say, but we can't take this land of Canaan. Let's go back to Egypt. Let's be slaves again. They disobeyed. Now, Joshua spoke up. And Joshua said, listen, the land we passed through is good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land that flows with milk and honey. He will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord. Do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. Joshua joined his voice to that of Caleb we saw in chapter 13. We can take the land because God is with us. But the people refused to believe. It says in verse 10, the whole assembly talked about stoning them. Oh, we see this heart of disobedience. And then the Lord speaks. And notice what he says to them. Verse 21, as surely as I live, and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of those who saw my glory and the signs I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their ancestors. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see the land. But because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit it. Since the Amalekites and the Canaanites are living in the valleys, turn back tomorrow, set out toward the desert along the route to the Red Sea. So God says to the people, because you would not believe, you will not enter the promised land. Turn back into the wilderness. If we read on for the rest of chapter 14, we're told God says you're going to spend 40 years in the wilderness, wandering, until this entire generation passes away. Your children will inherit the promised land. They will enter the rest. There are only 2 exceptions. Caleb got to enter the promised land and Joshua, because they spoke to obey the Lord. They were the only 2 of the original generation who entered the promised land. What a sad day it was in the history of Israel that those who experienced the glory of the Exodus did not get to enter the rest of the promised land because they disobeyed. And that's why the author of Hebrews has used them as an example. He said, we have experienced the glory of salvation. God has delivered us from bondage of Egypt, that is, from the bondage of sin. But let us not be like them. Let us not waver in our belief. Let us not disobey. Let us keep on believing, hold true to the Lord, follow him wherever he leads, that we may enter the rest, all that he has promised for us. So we spent a few days looking at this story from the Old Testament because it's so important to see the warning there. Those Israelites who experienced the Exodus did not go into the promised land. The children did, but they didn't because they disobeyed. They didn't continue to believe. And we who follow Christ must keep on believing. Hold fast and true. We were saved by faith, and we will continue following Jesus by faith. Let us do so. Hope you join us for our next session in our Bible study of Hebrews. We'll begin looking at chapter 4. So be with us for our next time in the 5-minute Bible study in the book of Hebrews.